I'll just start by introducing myself. My name is Ndumiso, and I will be taking you through today's training on conversion from Pastel Partner to Palladium. So I'll just go through the steps that you need to follow to do the actual conversion from one database or a Pastel database and converting it into the Palladium database. Before I begin, can I just confirm if everyone can hear me? Can everyone hear me? Am I loud and clear? No issues with audio? Thank you. Thank you for the feedback. I will now begin. So first things first, we need to get or sort of like close off the year in Pastel before converting into Palladium. So you need to ensure that you have your database backed up from Pastel. You have it backed up in terms of you did a year end, data integrity is all fine. You're happy with it and all is sorted out in that regard. So you just need to ensure that your data integrity is passed on Pastel before you attempt to move it into Palladium, because then if you didn't close off the year correctly and your data integrity wasn't passed correctly, there are going to be some issues when it comes to the actual conversion on Palladium. So you just need to ensure that all of that is in place and everything is fine in that regard. So once you do have the Pastel database backed up and you have a copy of the backup, first things first, you need to have the pervasive control center or control documentation center, which is basically sort of like Management Studio, but it's pervasive. So it's not SQL, but it's pervasive. So I'll just open that up to sort of restore my backup or restore the backup from Pastel onto pervasive. So I'll be able to create a connection from Palladium to the pervasive to get the database and convert it into SQL type of thing. So first things first, I open my control center, pervasive control center. Once I have this open, I'll go to tools and I will go ODBC administrator. This is where I create or restore my Pastel database onto pervasive. So once this is done, I'll go to system DSN. Once I'm on system DSN, I'll just go add. And I'll use pervasive ODBC engine interface. Once that is selected, I'll just go OK. Then I'll call it Beeline. Then I'm going to create my connection. So I'll just keep all of these settings as is. I don't have to change anything on there. I keep this as classic. And then this is where I specify my directory or the location for this particular connection to go look for my database, my backed up database from Pastel. So when I go specific database that I'm looking for. So on my machine, it's on my desktop and I've got a folder for Pastel conversion. When I click on the drop down, these are all the databases that I have. And I'm looking at the one that I've got open currently. So I'll select my database. And I'll just click OK, and then go OK. Then once that database engine is created, that particular connection, I'll just go test, just to ensure that a connection is established successfully. As you can see, test connection was successful. So all is good in terms of the connection. It's able to communicate and find my connection successfully. So once I'm done with this, I'll just go OK again. So now I have created or restored my database on Pervasive to allow for the connection. So there is my database that I just created, that I've just specified. Now that I've created it on Pervasive, my second step will be to create a shell database. So sort of like a SQL database on Palladium that I'll pull everything into. So to do that, I'll just open Palladium. And I'm going to create a new company. So I'll just call it training. And then I'll just continue creating my company. Doesn't have to be as detailed, but I'll just go with it. So country selection. And then I'll have to specify my date settings. So it's important to ensure that the financial period matches the financial period that was rolling on Pastel as well. So in order to be able to successfully pull the database from Pastel into Palladium successfully, I need to ensure that at all times my financial years agree. So I need to get my financial period at this point, at this stage of the conversion correct, because if it's not correct, I'll have to recreate my shell company in which I'll pull the database into. So I'll just specify my financial period on here. Okay, that is fine. My current year end. All of that is fine. Locations. This can always be changed on Palladium once the database is created. So these details at this point are not as important. Not that it's not important, but you can always go into Palladium and change these settings on there manually once you've created the database. The most important parts to just ensure that are correct on initial creation is the country selection, which is something you can't change, and just ensure that your financial period is correct and is on point. So once this is done, I'll just go. As you can see, the country, there's a bit of a warning message that sort of notifies you that once the company information has been saved, you will no longer be able to change the country selection. So once I can't change it, country selection is as is, I can never change it. I'll have to recreate a new company if I make a mistake there. So now it says, please select your home currency. This is also important to get it right on initial creation. So I'll just use my South African Rand. I'll just have one currency. Then when it comes to my ledger accounts, my chart of accounts, it's always best to go with manual setup because it gives you the flexibility when it comes to mapping your accounts from Pastel and into Palladium. It allows you to sort of, in a way, keep your Pastel accounts as was, and you don't have to change much in terms of your account numbering and your account descriptions when you go with manual setup. Whereas with generic setup just picks up the generic setup as per Palladium, and then you'll have to change all your accounts that were on Pastel and match them to Palladium specific generic setup. So if you go with manual, it's always best when you're doing a conversion, and then you just use user defined financial categories and just select Pastel Partner default financial categories. So it sort of allows you to keep your Pastel accounts or chart of accounts and not have to change everything when moving over into Palladium. But we'll have a look at that in further detail when we do the mapping of accounts, once I've established connection to the database and imported it into Palladium. I'll just create a second segment for my chart of accounts because Palladium works with 2 segments per account. So how it works is we have segment 1, segment 2, then we put the 2 segments together to create an account. So I'll just call my second segment sub account and then just make it alphanumeric to allow for flexibility when it comes to creating my accounts. And then I'll just go okay. So once all of that is done, I have my shell company, or the shell in which I'll pull my database into, created. Then once that is done, you go to the control panel, which is your second step of the creating the shell company. And then I'll use the Pastel Partner Data Importer. So from here now, I'll connect to the pervasive database and import into SQL now. So I'm making the transfer. I'm doing the transfer from pervasive into SQL. So I'll just specify my connection. It's an ODBC test. Connection is successful. Basically telling me that it's finding the connection and all is good to go. So now I'll start my transfer. So now it's fetching all the documents that are on that particular data, on this particular database's backup. So it's fetching all the information I need from there now for me. It's basically importing it into SQL. Okay, so data is transferred successfully. So at this point, I am ready to start with my conversion. So everything has now been imported onto SQL, into my shell company on SQL. So now all I need to do is do the actual conversion into Palladium. So now I'm going to pull everything into Palladium itself. I'm going to pull everything into Palladium and do the actual imports into the actual database. So to do that, I need to go to my Pastel Partner Data Extractor. And then I must mark the required steps. So it's a fresh conversion. So I need to go through every step to ensure that everything is imported and converted from Pastel into Palladium. So once I go next, it's just going to show me what's imported from Pervasive SQL to my Microsoft SQL server, which is what Palladium runs on, the MS SQL. All pervasive SQL data must be imported to prevent problems during conversion. I'll just go yes. As you can see, the thing I was stressing about the financial periods, if you have a look here, it's immediately told me that we've detected Pastel's company current financial year is different to Palladium's company's financial year. So if I carry on with this data conversion now, I am going to have problems for sure. So as per Pastel, it's the 1st of March to the end of Feb. So that's the correct date period. So I'll just cancel quickly. As you can see now, it's grayed out. I cannot change my date settings on here. Once I've selected or specified my date range or my financial period, I can never change it. So like I did say, I need to recreate it now because the financial periods were incorrect. So I'll just do that quickly. Just go and we'll call it Palladium. So I just wanted to show you guys one of the problems that you might encounter when it comes to using an incorrect financial period. It's a lot of work because it takes you back a lot. So you need to ensure that you have all your stuff in order before you attempt to do the actual training. So like you just saw now, if your financial period is not correct as per the financial period on Pastel, you will have problems. So I'll just call it Palladium Business, country selection, same procedure. Everything's the same. All I need to do now is keep this as is, 1st of March 2019 to the end of Feb. And I can just move my currency. Use manual setup again. Create my second segment, call it sub account. Make it alphanumeric, 4 digits. Just do the import again. now that that's done, we'll just go into the data extractor. I'll mark all the steps that are required for me to complete the conversion. Happy with all of this, and I just say okay. So now that my date range matches, my financial periods are in sync, now I'll do the actual mapping of my accounts into Palladium. If you have a look here, I used the Pastel specific, Pastel Partner specific account sets or accounts, and I don't have to do a lot of changes in this regard because everything is the same. So I'll make a few changes, but not a lot. So I'll just keep this as is, and I'll just call it revenue, and it just does the linking for me. So I'm just linking my Palladium account class here. Now I'm going to go through the process of doing the actual mapping into Palladium. So as you can see, if I'd selected the generic setup, I would have to change all of these accounts and actually remap everything from Pastel to Palladium. It's just an expense. And then you get situations like this where some of the account numbers don't match the relevant categories or account classes, as is the case here. It's classified as other income, but the Palladium account as of now, or the account number from Pastel, is currently a 2000. So now I have to reclassify it to the 1000. So these are the minimal changes that I was talking about that would have to take place. So I'll just do that quickly here. And then I'll just say it's other revenue, other income. As you can see, most of it just maps and picks up quickly, automatically. So that is great. As you can see here, it's still classified as account as expenses. Sorry about that. Whereas it's supposed to be under equity. So this is also something I'd have to change for my dividends. So I'll just do that quickly. Classify it correctly under my equity, dividends. I have my tax. Don't need to change much there. Share capital. Retained earnings. Then I get my loan, my liabilities. I'd have to do a bit of changes here as well, because it looks like it's shareholder loans, most of these. So I'll just keep them classified as owner or partner contributions. And I'll just change my long-term borrowings. Installment sale. Just do this fixed asset. Other asset. Investment. Got my inventory. Stock reserve, other current liabilities, so I'll have to reclassify that to my liabilities. And then I'll just call it a liability, classify it as a liability. And I've got my accounts receivable, other asset, staff loans, I have to change that, accounts payable, to correctly classify it under liability. So accounts payable, classify my bank, got all my cash control accounts, they're all classified as other current assets. They're currently grouped in the liabilities, so I'll have to bring it back into the assets. So I'll just change these to 8. Other asset. So now that I've mapped all my accounts to account classes on Palladium, I can just go next. This comes in useful, it comes in handy when it comes to doing the actual imports. So currently I'm just doing all the settings when it comes to mappings, telling the system how to pull accounts or import accounts into the system, how should it import them, where should it classify all the accounts it's importing from Pastel. So this has to do with everything that I'm doing now, the actual mappings. I believe we'd have to change the rates here and classify them or make them the current tax rate, my VAT rate, which is 15%. So I'll just edit it here. Then I've got my non-taxable and my exempt. And I'm going to map my different my tax codes. So no tax, I'll just use non-taxable or 0 VAT exempt. My standard rate, VAT on sales, VAT on purchases. And I get a VAT adjustment. Please note that you can also change the tax codes or create additional tax codes once you have completed the conversion into Palladium. So you can always change these particular mappings, specifically the tax codes or your VAT codes. You can always add additional VAT codes and change whatever mappings were done initially on here while you're doing the conversion. So this can always be changed. If you find a situation like this particular one here, the VAT adjustment that is at a rate of 100%, I currently don't have a code for it, but you can always create it. So at this point, I'll just use my VAT on sales and my VAT on purchases. Not going to mess anything up when it comes to the conversion, but problem is if I leave it blank, it's not going to allow me to proceed. So I'll just leave it at the 1 and the 2 for now. And you can always change it once the conversion is complete. So now I'm going to create and map my payment terms. 0 is normally cash on delivery. So I'll just create that quickly, COD. And I'll just make it a cash on delivery. Next, then I'm going to create and assign my account sets. So I'll just go assign, got my services and my inventory goods. So So most of this is just mappings of account sets, your that codes, your terms before I do the actual importing of my master files and all my and I'll do the same for services. So this was inventory, and then I'll do the same for services. I'll just do the mapping. Here we go. So once I create my account sets and link my accounts to my account sets, I'll just go next. There are no jobs or projects on this particular database. And then I'm going, these are all my customers that I'm going to be importing into the system. So it's just a quick check should you need to check anything, but no changes required here unless you want to specify specific tax codes, default tax codes, for instance, for the particular customer. In this case, the vendor. So that's where you do the actual mapping. And then I'm going to start importing my inventory items. Currently on this particular database, there are no inventory items, so I will not need to do the import. So now I'm about to start importing the actual master files. Now that all the mapping's done and I'm happy with it, I'm at a point of doing the actual imports. So now I'm pulling in all my master files into my Palladium business database that I created. So now I'm going to import my GL transactions. As you can see written in red here, current year must be imported first. So I'll do that, current year. I'm happy with that. And then I'm just gonna go import. So before I do the actual import, it's going to ask me to link my accounts, my main accounts. So these are your retained earnings, my payables accounts, receivables, inventory and services, warehouse, and manufacturing. So I'll get into it immediately and I'll link my particular accounts. So there's my retained income for retained earnings, current earnings, currently no account for it. So I'll just quickly create one. So I'll go add new account segment. Equity is 5,000, so I'll just call it 50/50. Current earnings, account class, there is current earnings, full account, just go okay. Create my sub account, just make it zeros. And I'll call it CY for current year. And once I'm done with that, I'll just build my actual account. So I'll double click on my first account, my first segment of the account, and I'll double click on my second segment also. If you have a look at the account number here, it was building my account as I was double clicking on my specified accounts on the list here. So I've got my 50/50 000 My description as things stand is current year, current earnings, CY for current. So once I click OK on that, it brings me back to the screen where I'm going to do my final check before OKing to create the account. So I've got my number, which I can't edit or change. I've got my description. I can always come in here and just change it should I decide I want to have a different description for this particular account. I've got my account class down here. So I'll just go OK to create my account and just double click on that to map or link my current earnings account. Then I'm going to link my default bank. I'll use Standard Bank, then currency exchange. So let's just say profit or loss, foreign exchange. I'll link my payables, supplier control, purchase discount. Use discount received because the purchase discount, my prepayments. Trade deposits. And then I'll have additional costs. Please just take note also that you can always change or link different accounts on here as well. But it's not advisable because it's going to pull transactions into these particular accounts on here. So if you know that you use them for sure, it's always best to just link the correct accounts when you do the actual import or conversion initially. So for this one, I'll use additional costs. So I'll just use recovery account, my receivables, customer control, sales discount, discount allowed, and my deposits. Looks like I used the wrong account there. Okay. Item assembly cost. Just link my stock movement. Adjustment or write-off, inventory adjustment. My warehouse. This is my GRV. All my goods received note. Don't really have it on here, so I'll just select an account. It's only going to affect my conversion if I've got an actual account on Pastel that is specific to GRVs and I have to import it or import it into the linked account. So this database doesn't have any warehousing transactions. So my particular choice there won't give me any problems. Same with my work in progress. I'll just select the stock account and my cost variance account. Again, I'll just use my stock movement account. And then it's obviously I need to link previous year accounts also. So if I just do this, Palladium automatically allows you to just, would you like to copy the current year's linked accounts to the previous year's linked accounts, which is what I'll do now. If I go yes, all my previous year will be linked and matched to my current year settings. So once all my accounts are linked, I'll just click on OK, and it's going to start the actual import of my transactions. So I've done my current year. Now I'm going to do my history. There we go. All my history and my current year's financial transactions have been imported into all my specified accounts. And then I'll just go next. I'll import all my customer invoices. There was nothing to import on this particular database. And I'll import all my vendor invoices, which is the history. So it sort of captures all my opening balances. So now that I'm done with that, I'm going to import my open items or balances brought forward, POs and SOs and inventory values. So it's all my other opening accounts. So I'll do my opening balances of all my other accounts. Okay, this was quite a small database. There wasn't a lot of transactions in it. That's why everything is going so quick and it's just flowing. So normally on big databases, this whole process and this whole procedure takes a bit of a while, but it's the same thing. Follow the same steps. Everything is just identical to what I've done now. Only difference is it takes longer on importing and pulling off data from the pervasive SQL into the MS SQL and ultimately importing it into the database. So now that all of that is done, I'm just going to click on finish. The utility saved data is not required when the conversion has been completed. So my conversion is basically completed at this point now. And it's asking me, would I like to remove all the utility saved data? So my utility saved data is all the steps that I was going through here. That was specifying my mappings, all my imports. So for now, I'll just keep it. So I'll just go no. And my conversion is complete. So it looks like my deposit account or the deposit account that I used is incorrect because it's not recognizing it. That's why my data is currently out of balance. And then if you have a look here, it's going to tell you where the balances or the imbalances were picked up. Apart from that, everything was matched correctly, and conversion is complete. So if you come across a situation like this, obviously you'd have to check or use the correct deposit account for the data to be pulled into correctly. Other than that, that is how you do the Pastel conversion. Those are the steps, and that's basically what you need to follow. To fix such imbalances, you need to ensure that you're mapping off the linked accounts, like I was emphasizing when I was busy doing my linked accounts mapping. You need to ensure that you use the correct account so that Palladium knows which account to use to pull or import whatever transactions are sitting in the same account on Pastel. It needs to ensure that it pulls it into the same account on Palladium, which will then ultimately result in having your data integrity balancing on initial conversion. Otherwise, that is it. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer your questions now. So you can just chat and